Hello, everyone. Hope you're all well. It's the first webinar for many of you for the new year. So, Happy New Year, we can still say that. And we wanted to have a special bridge webinar for all the cohorts we have at Lightful because we're very happy to actually have Beth Cantor with us. It's the first time that she's actually next to me.
Yes.
She's been to London for this week, and we've had many interesting webinars and workshops together. And now it's time to actually have a webinar face to face with all of you. So my name is Teresa Litza. I'm a social media manager at Lightful, and we've got Beth Cantor, master trainer, author, and nonprofit expert, to talk about setting New Year's resolutions in terms of social media. So it will be some sort of recap for the things that we've actually talked in the past, and also an opportunity to review what we've done up to now and how we can all improve our own social media objectives and also the personal process and workflows when we want to be more effective and productive. So hopefully everyone can adjust the tips that we're going to talk about and make sure that it resonates with your own productivity and your own challenges. If you have any questions, feel free to add everything on the chat, and we'll have a lot of time in the end to make sure we hear your goals, your thoughts, and what you'd like to do during 2020. So since we're starting the new year, it's a new year, it's time to set new goals. And it's the perfect opportunity now to start thinking, what would you like to improve this year? What would you like to see changing, for example? And there could be many aspects, and it doesn't mean that you need to change everything or that you should feel overwhelmed in order to change everything. But it's useful to review, for example, the processes. How have you been working up to now? What are the tools that you are actually using? Is there something that you feel that you might want to try out? Or is there something that doesn't really work for you and it takes more time to actually do your job? And then it's also time to review the internal collaboration. Do you feel that you can manage everything on your own? Is there someone in your team? It might not be their job, but can still help with some ideas in terms of social media and comms in general. And then the practical content. Are you organized and trying to schedule things in advance? Does that work, for example, once a week? Or do you review your posts once a month? And all these are important when you set the objectives. You need to make sure that you set some smart goals. So, pretty much small, achievable, measurable goals that you can actually achieve, for example, every month or throughout the year. And once you set the objectives, you also want to think, how do I define success? What resonates with my organization and my goals? And how can I make sure that I can tell whether everything I'm doing is successful or not? So all these are just some ideas, and it probably makes more sense to discuss with all of you in the end the things that you want to improve. It could be any of these, it could be everything, or it could be nothing of them, and you might have other ideas in mind. So it's great today to have it more interactive in order to be able to hear more from you and get to ask Beth actually for questions in terms of how we can be more productive and stay on top of all things. So we'll start with a bit of a recap of some things we've discussed on previous master classes. And in case you haven't worked on them, it might be useful to have a think on how you want to start the year and all the things that you might want to review. If you have created personas in the past, you might want to look again and see if they still make sense based on your posts. And if you haven't created personas before, it might be a great experiment to actually try out. The personas are fictionalized characters that represent your target audience. And it's very useful to have a think of your ideal followers, those that you can actually reach and create more relevant content for them. So it's a process that can start with some assumptions. You just assume that you know your audience. And then you continue with some surveys you want to try out and look at your analytics and try to improve that from time to time in order to be able to understand more of your audience. And it's useful to remember that when we're talking about target audience on social media, it's not just one person, it's not one persona. So you have your followers, your donors, your supporters. You also have the influencers who are probably policymakers, journalists, or even experts and activists. And then you also have the organizations. They might be partners, it might be other organizations that you're working together, or even if you have to reach the government. So when creating the personas, you want to think of those that make more sense, that you want to reach through your social channels, and how you can create content that resonates with all of them. And in case you remember, we've had a worksheet some months ago with most of you on how to create the personas, how to write down their positive trends, the opportunities, the fears, and the headaches that they might have. And if you haven't done that already, we'll be happy to help and review that. It's also a good exercise when starting the new year, if you have created the previous ones a while ago, to actually review that and see if it still makes sense. Another thing you might want to review when starting a new year, and it's probably the favorite time for me to actually look at the content planning, is to start thinking of your content for the next months. It could be for the next month, or even, let's say, for 6 months or even 12 months. It's more like an overall idea of the content calendar and what you want to include in your social posts. You don't need to create all the posts right now, but it's more like having a calendar. It could be an actual print calendar, it could be Google Calendar, or just social scheduling and just include some ideas. But it's useful to save time on a day-to-day basis. It helps with the collaboration, but it can also help you be more strategic.
I'm just joking.
I started coughing, and Beth is afraid I might have the coronavirus, and we started laughing.
Yes, I ran out to get my mask.
And just some ideas in terms of the 8 steps to build a content calendar. It's useful to have a think of your existing content, find some new ideas, and also think of your upcoming campaigns. What are the channels that you want to post on, or what's the ideal frequency? Then you want to start planning the content, and once you actually schedule it, you want to make sure that you do stay social and you measure the success. So all these don't necessarily need to happen now, but it's good to have a think and start organizing the planning for the months ahead. And another piece that's very important, and it's always hard because when you're in a small team, it's not really easy to work with others. But when it comes to collaboration, it might be even with some sort of brainstorming. You might ask your volunteers or anyone who's helping you with stories to actually help with the content. Or you could just ask them for more ideas in terms of the upcoming campaigns. So it's not just you, and it might feel lonely sometimes if you're on your own working on social media. But there might also be an opportunity to work with other organizations. There might be a campaign that another organization is running, and it might be relevant for you to be part of that. Or you can also work more with your volunteers and hear some thoughts. What would they do differently? And how can you adapt the content based on what they want? Yeah, I'm checking the chat now. Ria will make sure we send the personas worksheet. And we'll also send the slides, of course, if you want to review anything else. Another important bit that's probably really helpful to do starting the new year is to look at the tools. There are many ways to use technology and digital tools to improve your workflow, and several of them are free. Luckily, in all categories, I think of the ones I've mentioned, you can find at least one free tool, which is very useful. So you might want to review your tools in terms of content planning, social media scheduling, campaign planning, image creation and editing. You might want to look at analytics or even the online communication with your team, if there is some sort of messaging that you're using. And then, of course, if you're also working on other areas in your organization, you might want to look at your CRM or even some fundraising support. So if you have already used some of these tools or many of them, or even one of them, you might want to think what works best for you. What's the best way to use it, for example, daily, weekly, or even monthly? And you might also want to research if there are other tools that can help you more for something that you might not use right now. And of course, there is Lightful, and it can help you with some of the things that we've just mentioned in terms of social media scheduling. You can look at the awareness days and the best time to post. This is actually a new feature. I'm not sure if all of you have actually seen that, but it's very useful when I'm scheduling posts. It helps me because it looks at the channel and the posts that I actually have, and it tells me the best time to post based on the actual audience, not just in general. You can also tell your story and plan your campaigns. You can look at the hashtag generator. So if you're writing content and you're not sure of the right hashtags, you get some suggestions based on the popularity of the hashtags. And of course, you can measure the success through analytics and improve the collaboration. If you want to bring volunteers or other people from your team to help you, you can give them the right access without necessarily having them to publish directly on social media. And I think we've just mentioned on defining success and using the right tools to make sure that you do see whether you are successful or not. In terms of defining success, the analytics can be very subjective, and it depends on what you want to get out of your social media presence, what the expectations are, and how you want to measure it. So there's 4 different ways, if we have to have 4 very broad categories, and it has to do with the reach, if you want to raise awareness, for example. If you want to make sure that more people participate in your posts and they add more comments and likes, then you want to track the engagement. If you want to make sure that you bring more people to your site or other pages, you want to track the traffic and the clicks. And of course, if you want to involve fundraising, you want to track the total donations, the donors, or the donations per channel. Or these are just examples of the types of things that you want to measure. You don't need to measure every single thing. And the good thing with analytics is that it might seem overwhelming, but you might just focus on 1 or 2 things. So you don't need to feel that you need to add everything, but just make sure that if there's at least 1 thing that you want to track, that you try to be consistent. Even if it's once a month or even every other month, it's good to go back and see the things that you want to improve. And you might be familiar, because we hear that quite a lot when we're talking to many of you on the challenges of getting a buy-in. And we know it's hard sometimes to convince someone who's not familiar with social media to actually invest the time and the resources in terms of getting the right tools, giving you the right time, the right capacity. And it's good to remember when you have these challenges that changes will not happen overnight. It's good to start with an understanding that social media can be a great piece of your overall comms and marketing strategy. But we also know that sometimes it's not a direct source of income. So that might make it harder. But that's when you want to educate pretty much your stakeholders on how social media can really warm up your current and future donors. And we go back to the definition of success. Engagement is really important. So you don't necessarily need to focus everything on fundraising on social media. But if you can make sure that you build a long-term relationship with your supporters, then you might actually have bigger chances to actually turn them into donors. So all this takes effort, and there is the consistency that you need to have, but it can also have long-term benefits in terms of your organization and the objectives that you have.
There were a couple questions that came in about the Lightful feature, best time to post. And the first one was, well, actually the second one, then we'll go to the first, is how come the data from the Lightful feature differs from the built-in tools, analytic tools for Facebook and Twitter?
So I assume, and of course I need to confirm that with the team, that the data that we have at Lightful is based on the actual posts that you do through Lightful. So for example, if you schedule 3 posts through Lightful, then it tracks based on this data. But on Facebook, if you schedule half of them natively on Facebook and the others through Lightful, then you might see different results.
Yes.
So it's probably safer.
Based on the data set. That's what I was thinking.
It's probably safer to be more consistent. And that's with analytics in general.
Yeah.
It's just to make sure that you have 1 source that you're tracking everything. Because it's also the case with Facebook. If you're not consistent and you go and check your analytics there, then you might see some differences. And there's a question from Live. Does it suggest best time based on peak engagement or best time to post right before peak? So this is on peak engagement. if you can see from the graphs, when it shows that it's higher, it's the time that you actually have the higher engagement. So ideally, you want to make sure that you do schedule your posts based on that.
And it's giving you like a graph of each hour during the day, and you can see, oh, noon is way up, so that's peak engagement.
Especially if there's a big difference, for example, from the morning till the afternoon, then you know that this is probably the best time to schedule your posts. Or at least to have some balance and make sure that you spread them accordingly, not just like all of them at the same time. And now it's time to get to some ideas on how to improve your social media workflow. And I'm handing it to Beth, and we'll make sure we answer more questions, of course.
Sure. So this is New Year's is a great time to kind of reflect on your ability to get stuff done and get it done efficiently, because I guess the less time you're spending on the workflow, the more time you have for other things. I imagine that if I were to take a poll, that most of you would tell me that social media isn't your full-time job. Maybe there's a few exceptions, but at best, I suspect that you're probably allocating somewhere between 5, maybe 10 hours per week. Some of you maybe more. So these are just some tips on how to squeeze it into your day. So first of all, it's really good to have I think a morning ritual of checking your social media. Like we have a routine of checking our email, why not our social media? And it doesn't have to be all day, 10 or 15 minutes in the morning after you check in with your email to see if there's anything you need to respond to. I also think that I know in my own work and trying to juggle social media with other types of tasks like writing reports or things that require a lot of concentration, I found that higher concentration, I would have to block out more time and do it during my peak when I had the ability to concentrate more, which is my mornings. So sometimes I'd focus on those tasks, and then as a break and a reward, I would check into social. And to get me in the habit, I would actually even add that into my calendar. So I think it's really good to break your workflow into different chunks, and not to try to do them all at once. So you do want to have a chunk of maybe a half hour a week of planning and do all the things that Teresa has mentioned in terms of your content calendar. Then you want to spend another chunk of time organizing your content assets, pulling together all the images, writing the blurbs, all of that material. And then you want to have another chunk of time actually scheduling it in your scheduling tool, which I assume is Lightful. And then another chunk of time where you're engaging. And by doing this, by batching the tasks by similarity, you're reducing something called cognitive load, which is that, oh, what do I do next? It's faster if you're doing all the same type of workflow and not intermixing it. And again, putting those times into your calendar for those specific types of tasks will also help you be more efficient. Okay, don't succumb to FOMO. It doesn't allow you to really focus. You're not missing anything. It's okay if you take a break from social. Don't worry about it, just as long as you're consistently are checking in. Another trick I do, and I was actually doing it right before this webinar, is you can periodically check in during the day. Maybe you're waiting in line for lunch, or you're waiting for people to arrive at a meeting. And the other thing I think is also really important is to learn the art of scanning. Sometimes we want to get stuck and we want to read everything. We see a link and we want to read the whole article, but it's really good to scan first, scan the horizon, and then go deep. So let's go to the next slide. Those are tips for squeezing social media tasks into your day. Another thing that we need to do is manage our attention online. And social media and just being online can be distracting. And if we have a million tabs open and we're bouncing around, we can train ourselves to be distracted. And the more distracted you are, the less efficient you are. So it's always good to set goals and priorities for the day in terms of your tasks. And you want to kind of remind yourself at regular intervals, whether your current activity, what you're doing right now online, is that serving your specific purpose? Are you off? Went on Facebook with the intention of posting or engaging with your organization's fans? Or are you all of a sudden distracted and saw another article on coronavirus? Let's see how many people have caught it now, and whether or not it's in the UK, and or whatever. So it's really good to be focused. And actually, there's some tools that you can use to help you focus. One of the things I was using routinely is a plugin for Chrome, and it would turn my feed into pictures of cats. So I didn't have to see pictures that were distracting or things or news. And so I would go right to my organization's Facebook page and focus on that. If you do get distracted, it happens. Be gentle on yourself, just be aware, and you bring yourself back. And one thing that I do, I had to go through attention training, and that's actually being very, very mindful about like what you're doing online and thinking about, is this my purpose? And then, oh, well, I'm distracted. I'm going to need to bring it back. But you don't want to make your time online so rigid that it gets in the way of engagement, because engagement is really more open and it's kind of organic, and it should feel fun. And did we just see a quote?
There was a question on the tools, what you've said in terms of attention.
Attention tools. I will actually flip a URL into the chat as soon as we get into that. But I have a list of actually happy and healthy apps, and it also includes a number of different apps that help you focus on the work that you have to do. And one that I'm going to go right away to is called Screen Time. And if you go to my blog, it's like the second or the third blog post that's there. And it was developed by the Stanford University Interaction Lab. And it's a chat bot, and it's called the Screen Time Genie. And you interact with it. You tell them what you want to focus on. Do you want some email productivity tools? Is it social productivity tools? And they give you some tips and references to different apps. So Chrome has a lot of plugins that will change the nature of your feed to take all the pictures out and change them to pictures of cute kittens.
That sounds
so
great.
You're less distracted.
I feel like we all need the attention training at some point.
Yes. Another one I use is something called Pomodoro, which is basically a timer. And I put the timer on, and it helps me avoid procrastination. I put the timer on, so I'm going in and I am working on my engagement for 15 minutes. I put the timer on, and I try to get all my engagement tasks done without procrastination or distraction. The timer goes off and I go to the next thing.
Sounds great.
All right, let's see. These, we can send you the slides, but these are a bunch of different techniques, some that do have tools and others that are just workflows that you can do to help you maintain focus. I think one of my favorites, let me see, is to take time at the end of the day to reflect whether you've accomplished your goals or not. And you can make this broader than your social media goals. You can make it your whole workflow. I always start my day with writing down a couple of things I want to accomplish. And then I periodically look at that list through the day to say, am I on task? What distracted me? And at the end of the day, I reflect on it. And I don't beat myself up if I didn't, do something, but it gives me sort of a sense of how long work is taking, whether I'm procrastinating or whether I'm getting distracted or being inefficient. And having a sense of how long a task will take you is really good, because you can estimate your time blocks much better. So we want to flip to the next slide. And finally, I think with all of whatever we've talked about, whether it's workflow, content calendars, or any of the other suggestions, we're really setting new habits. And it's always good to start small. And I go by BJ Fogg's Tiny Habits framework. So you focus on one new habit at a time. You make it small or make it tiny. You find the trigger in your routine. When are you most likely to do this new habit? And then you have gentle reminders and fine tuning on the cycle. And one thing that I do on New Year's is I use a tool called futureme.org. And I write an email message post dated a year from now about, where will I be once I have put these new habits into practice, how will my life have changed? And I'm surprised every year when I get my new email from the following year, you know, what I've accomplished and what I haven't.
And we just want to hear more from you. These tips from Beth were actually very helpful, and it got me thinking of the things I want to set for the new year. And I love the idea of the futureme.org letter. And it's time to hear from you. When we're talking about aiming for improvement, and that could be anything really, what would you like to improve in 2020? Let's see the chat.
Well, sorry.
No worries.
There we go.
So we see that.
Oh, Q&A. Okay. You want to take that? It says, what would be the ideal time for posting a message on social media? Well, your audience is there.
Yeah, that's true. I'd say if you are using Lightful or you want to look at analytics directly, it might be useful to see at the times of your previous posts. So it just gathers all the information from your previous posts, and it does an estimate based on the engagement. So if your posts were more successful in the past in the afternoon, then you understand that your audience is spending more time on social media later in the day. So it's definitely something useful to look and start adding your content at the right time. And of course, review that if that changes.
All right, we have a few more here. And I just dropped the spreadsheet with the different tools in there. We want to improve our Facebook engagement, managing our social media. We engage, but we're not managing what we do. Oh, okay. So these are some things, areas of improvement.
Oh, yeah. We want to improve our Facebook engagement and likes. That's great. And it seems like a specific goal to work more towards that. Life says better collaboration and better workflow. Bob, better use of content calendar. Chrissy, managing our social media. We engage, but we're not managing what we do. Emma, I would like to be clearer on what we're trying to achieve as an organization. Right now, we're working on getting more followers, but I think we need to go deeper than that and look at how the followers engage with us. So that's definitely a good idea. Danai says, I'm trying to reduce my Facebook posts to get better engagement on it, even though I started doing that towards the end of last year. That's a nice thing to commit to.
Yes, it is. And I think it's also will tie into the upcoming webinar that's on measurement, because you'll want to look and see, you're going to try something new that you think will improve, but you want to actually have evidence that it has improved it. And that's of course with measuring.
Another goal from Life, also growing our Twitter and LinkedIn followers. Bob says, build on success on Facebook targeted boosts, show value for money. Julie says, what are the best platforms for scheduling tweets, Facebook posts, if you only work 1 day a week? Well, I have to mention Lightful.
Oh, of course. Lightful. That's the one I would recommend.
No, but still in general, because obviously you get it for free during the Bridge program. Say, if you haven't tried it or if you need any help to get back, I'll be happy to help. Because as Beth said, you can just spend even 30 minutes a week and be very focused and make sure you schedule some posts and not necessarily use too much of your time during the week. Margarita says, improve our LinkedIn audience in order to get more corporate donors.
I'm, you know, in the light of measurement too, I would also say how many more corporate donors? And I'd like how you phrase that because it implies a result.
Yeah, that's true. And it's probably helpful in general to think when you say, for example, I'd like to grow my followers, to set some practical goals, because obviously the number of followers can grow fast. But even if you set a goal, I'd like to get 50 new followers in the next 2 months, that's very specific and it actually feels more achievable. So instead of feeling bad that you haven't gained, for example, 2,000 followers in a month, you might feel great because you actually had progress from last month.
Yeah.
Nicholas says, we're trying to drive more conversions, actions on our website and recommend pages. That's great because it's very specific. And I assume
add numbers to it.
Yeah, I assume that the content is probably more focused on these and the pages to make sure that you lead the traffic there.
And not only like putting more numbers to it, but also if, let's say, you don't get your goal, is to then go back and look at why is it? Is there something about the landing page, that's not getting people to fill out the form or follow through in some way? And maybe think about setting up an experiment about how you can change that landing page. Maybe you need to change the look of it, maybe the placement, maybe it's the copy, maybe it's the messaging that gets people to the landing page. There's some mismatch, but I think with a specific goal like that and numbers, you have ways to actually evaluate those results and improve them.
Paula says, I want to create the big 3 campaigns during the year with social media and Google AdWords. I will use every tip you gave me, guys. So I could have a great schedule and better content in 2020. That's great. That seems like a great goal. Yes, that's a good tip from Paula. For Nicola, you can use Google Ad Grants for traffic on your website.
Let's see.
And another question, obviously some of you have already answered that, but feel free to be more specific. As we've said, it's more about this time of the year, setting some expectations and not just saying, for example, as what we could say, oh, I'd like to be better on social media. It's better to be more practical because we know that we don't always have the time. So what would you like to see changing in your social media use this year for your organization, based on your time, your resources, and everything you can do? Feel free to add in the chat. It's also a nice way to keep everyone accountable. Yes. So we could go like in a few months and be like, you said you want to improve the engagement. How are you doing?
Using a content calendar.
That's great.
So, so what would be what's like, if somebody, I'm assuming, Chrissy, and contradict me if I'm wrong, that you said using a content calendar and you're not currently using one?
Yes, it's very interesting to let us know more.
Yeah. So what's the first step, the first baby step to doing this? Whenever I have to do a task, if it's too big, I know myself, I don't feel like it's just overwhelming. True. And so I actually sit with myself and what is the first tiny step? I call it cutting up the salami into really small pieces. Yes, so Teresa, what would be the really small step to get started with that?
I think the problem with content calendar is that when you see, for example, one that's ready, you feel that's too much work. So you feel scared to actually start. But what's useful is like, if you feel that you can't add every single post and get you organized to detail, you can just create some themes and say, for example, I want on Monday to talk about my volunteers. On Tuesday, I want to talk about the campaign. And on Wednesday, I might share a post on fundraising. So this way you don't need to go into details, but you know at least 1, 2, 3 things that you want to plan ahead.
And maybe start with, don't try to schedule out the whole month if that's too intimidating. Exactly. Just do the first 2 weeks or the first week.
Yes, and then you get used to the process and it becomes easier.
Right. And I would put a recurring, I live by my calendar, and so my calendar is not just for meetings, but I actually block out time when I'm going to do my work. So I would, when I started my content calendar many years ago, I put a recurring time, 15 to 20 minute, 30-minute planning time in my calendar, recurring. And I tend to do it on Mondays. I do it like all my planning on Monday as much as I can. Sometimes Sunday nights.
It's a good start of the week this way. Yeah. Emma says, I would like to get more people in our organization involved in creating content. Right now, I come up with a majority and it's hard to stay inspired and I fear repeating myself. So how many people are in your team in broader sense? Because sometimes obviously it's hard when you're in a very small organization and there are only 2, 3 people. But also in that case, sometimes everyone has a good story. So they don't necessarily need to schedule your content. But you can also have some brainstorming sessions to hear their thoughts or how would they approach a campaign or talk about your work. And just grab some ideas that might be different for the messaging or some things that you might not have thought.
I mean, if you have that content calendar and you just have the theme or the idea, you can ask, other people to help, generate that. Now, some people like to write if it's around text, and some people like to do photographs, and then some are just don't have time for that, or they feel they don't have time for that. So especially like with writing, so you might want to like just do a quick interview with them to extract the content from them and do the final writing, or tell them that they can turn it in a draft and maybe you'll do the end polishing.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's also about making them feel that they can contribute content and they can feel involved. So it might be hard in the beginning, but once they understand that, they actually saw their idea being posted, and it feels nice to feel that you've done something different.
It's also really good to show them the results of the post and how many comments it has, and say, wow, this one did really well. So they get a reward.
More encouraged. Yeah, exactly. You're welcome. And we've covered the goals and the things we want to achieve, hoping at least for 2020. And it's time to answer more questions. Do you have any other questions that you would like to ask me or Beth? Anything that you might be facing in terms of challenges right now, or something that is a struggle in terms of your social media in your organization?
Or you could ask us anything.
Anything around productivity, because Beth is an expert in terms of getting the focus and the attention.
Somebody call me the queen of getting shit done.
Perfect. That's a great title. Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Ria.
See, do we have, oh wait, I think we got another question over in the Q&A.
Oh,
okay. Yes, you can't see the slides. We'll send the slides out.
Yeah, we'll make sure we send them over. And if you haven't shared yet any thoughts on your goals and what you would like to achieve on 2020, feel free to add it on the chat. This was more like an additional webinar because it felt like it's the start of the year, and everyone has different challenges and different goals, and it's good to just have a chat and feel that everyone is having their challenges, but it's good to like check in with everyone. I think from everything you've said, Beth, in terms of improving the processes, I would pick the focus and making sure that you do have the blocks of time to actually do the most important bits. And it's also based on our productivity. Not everyone is functioning the same way.
Yeah.
So it's always good to block these times that you need to be really productive.
Yeah, I found like, if I could give you one secret to productivity, was the thing that works for me is with content creation. It's not like in the old days where it's just a blank page and it's all coming out of your head. I think with social media, you're actually curating a lot and aggregating a lot of information or images. And I find like the going out and finding stuff and then organizing it, that's like the pre-work. And if I plotted out the time to actually find the stuff, organize the stuff, and then create the stuff, I would be too exhausted by the time I get to create the stuff. So then I always had to like schedule it in like 2 smaller chunks versus one slightly larger chunk.
Yes, makes sense. Charlie says, we set goals around increasing content generation from outside the marketing team and the quality measure alongside it. That's great. Chrissy says, I've joined a company who engage on social media, but nothing is planned or monitored. Where is a good place to start? I think if you want to make a case or start suggesting ideas, it's definitely important, as you say, to have a plan and actually monitor what's happening. So you might want to make a case of the results. For example, what if you plan 2-3 posts ahead? You don't need to have a full content calendar, but you can also make a case on how you're saving time and you get more posts published instead of just always go and publish without scheduling. And then you want to monitor, you want to have a look at the comments on what's happening, if there is something negative that you need to address. and also to monitor the success. So I feel it's a good start, and it's really important that they do engage on social media, but you can also take it to the next level and be the one who actually starts this.
And I think also, depending on what the company or organization does, they probably have a schedule of events or programs or communications. I don't know if it's a large company or a small company, but maybe, or a plan, a strategic plan, a program plan, take a peek at that and kind of align to that, because people will already be, it doesn't require recreating a lot of things from scratch.
Yes, that's true. Faith says, we're going to be more live videos. Also hoping to get into more live stream fundraising on Twitch. Definitely need to block off time for planning too. That's great. It's good to see that everyone has an idea of the things that they would like to do in the new year. It's definitely a good start. Perfect. Any other questions that you might have? Please let us know.
Oh, I see a third. Oh,
Joe says thank you.
You're welcome.
Danai is asking, what CRMs do people use for social media? I'd love to hear from everyone, because from my perspective, of course, from Lightful, I'm not using other CRMs in general, but I know many nonprofits have Salesforce. Yeah, it's usually the most popular one. But of course, there are many options.
Okay, here's an example from Joe. We use a master document with example posts in different categories to ensure consistency, as we have several contributors. Just a tip to share. Thank you. What a great tip.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's actually a good idea.
Having a style guide and some examples. You know what also is really good, and I think really valuable about a content calendar is the to-do at the same time is also then to organize your assets. I used to just keep a set of folders in Dropbox by month, January, and then underneath of it what days were, because so there's certain things that you write about or that you'll post about every year, and sometimes it's really just about going back to last year, seeing what you did and updating it or refreshing it. And that saves a lot more time than doing it from scratch. So if you are kind of rigorous in your approach and plan it, and then also organize all your content assets, then after you have a year, the following year, it gets a lot easier to produce and to manage.
Liv says, we're transitioning to network for good, but before that, our local site would have really just been a Google Drive to monitor updates irregularly. Faith says, we also use Salesforce, but are struggling with adoption from the team. That always takes time, I guess, with every tool.
Training.
Yes. It's probably another case of baby steps, and you can introduce a new tool and start trading. Maybe just show what it looks like, one use you can actually have, and take it from there.
Okay.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for joining today. Hopefully you found some great tips on the things you want to achieve in 2020. And of course, we'll make sure we share the slides and all the tools and the tips. So thanks again, Beth, for being here. And
thanks, Teresa. It's so great to do it in person, isn't it?
Finally in person.
And also because when I'm in California, it's 6 in the morning or 7 in the morning.
Better to have it at
yeah, it's much better to do it in the afternoon.
I know. Thanks so much for joining, everyone, and have a great afternoon. See ya.
Bye.